Okay folks, in this video we're going to show you how to replace the lens, the laser lens, in a 450 Blu-ray drive. Now we've got it to this point, and if you need to know how to get it to this point, you'll have to watch one of the other little videos. There's the video on how to dismantle the console, the PS3 Slim console, how to dismantle it, part 1, and we'll show you how to remove the actual Blu-ray drive from the console. And then there's another video that shows you how to open this up to get to this point, and that's called how to swap over the Blu-ray drive, the 450 Blu-ray drive. So now that we're at this point, we'll show you how to replace the lens. Now, removing the lens from the 450 is a little bit more complicated than the 410 or the 400. So everyone will have their own way of doing it, but the easiest and the simplest way that I find is to actually remove the whole deck from the mechanism, because there's a lot of tricky little springs and things that can cause you all sorts of havoc if you don't do this. So just remove the 4 retaining screws on the corners that have little rubber bumpers or little suspension bumpers underneath them. Just remove those 4 screws, and there's what they look like. Okay, and then this deck will just lift right out. Okay, and there's your lens there. Now what we want to do is remove this and put another one in. So the first thing I'll do is take the data ribbon off, and then we need to lift the spring at that side and move that rod along and just pull it right out, and then you can just lift the lens out. Okay, now once you've lifted the lens out, you need to keep this little block. That little block, that one's actually broken folks, but I don't have a working one to show you it on at the moment. You need to remove that little block and put it on the new lens. Okay, so let's open the box. This is the box that the new lens comes in. And just be careful not to touch the lens, be gentle with it. These are very fragile bits of equipment. There's the new lens, and what we're going to do is remove the block by unscrewing the little black screw in the bottom, and then put it on the new lens. I'll set that on the plastic so it doesn't dirty the lens. Just screw that in. Now what we need to do is put this new lens back in our deck. So how we do that is insert this rail through the 2 holes there, and then put it on the other rail. Okay, so you're almost there. And then insert it at this end. Insert it in there in the little hole and get it onto that spring, and on top of the little stub you just have to put the screwdriver in and lift it up and then slide it into position. Okay. And then the tricky bit here is that spring needs to be lifted back and brought over the top of the rail, and then it all clicks into place. So it's this spring mechanism here that runs around the back and up over the other one that can be very tricky to put into place if you don't take this deck out. And the other part that's very tricky, or can be, is this spring here can get loose, so you need to connect it up at the bottom and the other side and just make sure it clicks into place. That's it, clicked into place, and at the moment it's loose, so what I'm going to do is take it off and give it a bit of a squeeze together and then insert it again. There we are, and that's clicked in. So that's just that, you just have to squeeze it on again. Okay, so that's the new lens back in place. So we put our data ribbon back on. The blue side facing up. Sorry, blue side facing up. Sorry folks, this is it's difficult to do while trying to make sure it's on the camera. And just make sure it's aligned properly. There's a black line on the top of the data ribbon, and that must line up with that clip, and then you just push the clip down. So now we're ready to put this back into the mechanism. So you turn it upside down and gently drop it into place so that all the holes line up. Okay, now we can put our four screws back in, and these don't seem to be that magnetic. These screws are quite tricky, folks. You just have to be patient with them. Just screw it down until it meets with the rubber underneath. Now while I'm doing this, I just want to make a comment on the first video on dismantling the Slim. There's a couple of little mistakes I made in it, basically because I had a hangover, and I'll show you in a moment one of them, which is how to get the hard drive out. Actually a lot more simple than I showed it. Okay, so that's back in. Now what we need to do is now we're going to put the logic board back on here. So to put it back on, all you need to do is line it up, put it onto the there's two tabs there, two little tabs, one where's my thumb? Oh, there's one there and one over there. Just put it underneath and push it down, and that's it, it's in. Now all we have to do is reattach the three data ribbons that are on the top. That's 1, 2, and this little tricky one here. Three. Okay, 3. And the final thing to do is to connect should have done this earlier. Just take the top off to connect that last data ribbon, and to take the top off, there's 2 clips at that end, and there are 2 screws at the far end, and there you can see the lens from the top side, and we just have to connect up the data ribbon on the bottom. And it can be tricky, folks, but just spend the time to do it correctly and make sure it's aligned properly. Now I've managed to do that, but but the data room's quite short and it just connects in under there. And then we'll just put these bits back on. Top just clicks back in, and then there are 2 screws, one at each end. This will be a lot clearer for you when you have the Blu-ray drive in front of you. Okay, so now all we've got to do is remember to put that back in. Many a time I have put these things back in, put them back in the console, and they haven't worked simply because I forgot to put that back in. So always remember to put that back in. And then we flip it over, remembering to hold it in place with your finger, and put the base plate back on. Now there's a little tab there in the base plate, and it goes over that, or a little hole, and it goes over the tab there, and just click it into place. And make sure that that end goes underneath. A little black tab there and a little black tab there. It needs to go underneath it. And then we introduce the top. It just slots down, and yet again make sure that that goes underneath the black tab there and there. Switch it round, make sure everything's aligned, put our screws back in, and one in the middle, two at the far end, then 2 long ones that connect with the top cover. Now sometimes these can be difficult to line up, sometimes they just go straight in. That one went straight in. Hopefully this one will as well. No, that one's given me a few problems. So what I'll do is undo this one. And make sure this one's lined up properly. There we go. And hopefully this one will go in properly. There we go. Okay, now all we've got to do is put it back into the console.